to understand channel chi, we're going to start with range of motion and exploring the yin and yang planes of the body. So if I start with the hand, wrist, and forearm, simple extension and flexion. What I want to notice first of all about the wrist movement is it engages the whole forearm. Extension is when the back of the hand comes towards the back or outer arm. And in Chinese medicine, these are yang planes. They're yang planes because they represent the outside of the body, the part of the body that's hit by the sunlight the most, so generally darker, the skin is thicker. The palm and inner arm are considered the yin plane of the body. And there are 3 yang channels in the back of the arm, 3 primary yin channels in the inner arm. But right now we're going to just take them as a whole. So when I extend the wrist, the back of the hand is coming towards the back of the arm. So I'm shortening the yang plane, right? Or drawing it together. And sheets of connective tissue, right, connect the whole arm right up into the torso. As I do this, I may be able to feel the movement reaching all the way up through my shoulder, into the body, into the neck. Right? And the channels are embedded in this connective tissue, right, both superficial and deep. I can feel pull along the yin plane, right? So I'm stretching out that yin plane of the arm. Same time as I'm shortening the yang. And when I flex, the opposite happens. Stretch out the yang plane, shorten the yin plane. Right? So there's this complementary relationship that's always happening between the yin and yang planes in the arm. One shortens, the other lengthens, and then reverse. As the tissues shorten, as we take the tension off them, we think of that as a gathering in. Right? Gathering inward is a yin kind of movement. It gathers qi and blood into the tissues. Right? So here, when I extend, I'm gathering qi in towards the yang surface. So yin activity gathering in to the yang surface, and the yang activity stretching out, which moves and disperses qi. Right? On the inside, when I flex, right, now that yang activity, stretching out, moving and dispersing, happens on the yang surface, and the yin activity happens on the yin surface, that shortening and gathering together, right, or supplementing. So there's 2 ways of thinking about yin and yang. One is a kind of activity, and the other are the surfaces. Right? They can be combined in different ways. Another range of motion would be to abduct and adduct. Right? At the moment, for the wrist, it's not that important which one is which. Technically, if this is the neutral anatomical position, when the fingers come toward the body, that's adduction, like adding to. And abduction, abduction is moving away from, taking away, ab. Right? So when I turn my hands over, the abduction actually looks like my fingers are moving in towards the body. So that's a little confusing, but it's based on this position, where the yin surface of the arm is facing forward. In the torso, the chest is the yin surface, by and large. And the legs, the inner leg is the yin surface. These are all called the ventral surface, the surface that the person standing is forward, but if I were down on all fours, it would be the part facing the floor, and so the shady yin surface, as opposed to the back of my arms, the outer legs, and the back of my body, which would be struck by the sun, and so the yang surface. Here the yin and yang movement in the arm is a little less clear. Right? Certainly the activity is clear as my thumb comes towards the radial side of the arm, named after that radius bone. Right? That side is shortening, yin, and the other side is lengthening, yang, and then it reverses. That much is really clear. But I can feel it pull through the whole outer arm a little bit as I do that movement. So it's not as clear what its relationship are to the yin and yang surfaces as flexion and extension, right? Abduction, adduction. Right? It's sort of in between, because this line of the arm is in between the yin and yang surface, as is the inner one. This side is called the ulnar side, towards the little finger and that ulnar bone in the forearm. If I do another range of motion, palm up and palm down, this is also a more complicated range of motion. And this one I want to feel that it engages the whole forearm, right? The same way the other range of motions do. But here it actually involves a movement in the elbow joint. This doesn't move my elbow joint, neither does abduction. Adduction, but when I pronate, palm up, or rather supinate, palm up, and pronate, palm down, it's actually rotating the bones right at the elbow. Right, so this isn't strictly a wrist range of motion. It involves the elbow as well. Palm up is considered a yin motion, showing the yin surface of the palm and forearm. And it's the same motion as if I'm turning my palms forward, right, towards the yin plane of the body. And the yang is palm down, right, turning towards the back yang surface of the body. Again, it works the forearm in sort of a complicated way. Right? Not nearly so simple as bringing the yang surface together, right? Or the yin surfaces together. That rotation is a little less clear. But you can still feel how during the twist, right, there's a lengthening, a gentle stretch or pull that goes on, right? It feels more clear in some areas. Right? So those are the three basic range of motion of the wrist and forearm, right? Which includes a little bit of the elbow here. I can also, of course, do the fingers, right? Flex, or rather extend, and flex. Together. The thumb has a complex range of motion that we're not going to detail right now, just to save time. So I'm just going to think of it as extension and flexion in the thumb right now. And also abduction, splaying the fingers out, and adduction. This is, again, a sort of simplified way of talking about it. Thinking of moving the fingers away from the center line of the palm as opposed to away from the center line of the body. I can combine ranges of motion. I'm going to circle, right, which involves both that abduction, adduction, and that flexion, extension. Circling is called circumduction. I can do it with the whole wrist as well. And when I combine range of motion, sometimes I get a different quality of feeling. Right? When I'm just flexing, extending, I can feel that movement up into the forearm. I can feel the action of the muscles and tendons. But when I start to rotate, perhaps I'll notice another feeling a little more clearly, which is maybe a little bit of warmth, or a kind of tingle, an activation, maybe a little fullness, right? Fullness, like a very subtle sense of swelling, what we usually call distension. And that's the sensation of chi. Qi is a light substance. It's yang compared to blood, which is yin. So it's light, subtle, active, and warming. And a combined range of motion often produces more Qi sensation. Because combined ranges of motion activate the fascia, right, that the channels are in. So if we're talking about channel Qi, we're definitely talking to some degree about the fascia. Maybe talking about something more than that. We don't want to simply equate channels with the connective tissue of the body. But without the connective tissue of the body, there would be no channels, certainly. And no Qi sensation, because the nerve endings, the proprioceptors in the fascia, will give me that subtle sense of pressure, right? When I said slight swelling or distension, right? It's really kind of pressure feeling. And those nerve endings, proprioceptors, are in the fascia. They're different from the nerve endings that give us our sense of touch, right? That superficial pressure is different from the pressure inside the tissues, right? Which tell us, right, in part, what we're doing, what our range of motion is. How do I know what my hand is doing and control it when I can't see it, right? That's proprioception. So, this twisting movement, right, puts a different kind of tension on the connective tissue, as do circling movements. I can even add that abduction, adduction, flexion, extension with that pronation, supination. And if that gives me even more of that Qi sensation, that subtle pressure, warmth, activation, it's at least in part because I'm activating the fibers of the connective tissue, the collagen, right, in a different way. And the pressure around those proprioceptors, right, activates them and gives me a different kind of sensation. And in Chinese medicine, this is directly associated with therapeutic effect, this subtle quality of the proprioception. Right? So it's something we don't want to grasp after or worry about. If you feel it, you feel it. If you don't, you don't. You probably eventually will, not take too long. But we want to be aware of it, and we want to have a sense of what kind of movement stimulated the most, right? I can circumduct the fingers as well. I can't really pronate and supinate, right? I can't twist my finger without using the other hand. So all these ranges of motion should generate some Qi sensation. Certain range of motion will generate more than others. And I'm also being aware of the yang and yin planes of the body, and what the relationship is, right, between them, right? Shorten the yang, stretch the yin. Shorten the yin, stretch the yang. Right? Because the complementary action is also really well acknowledged as part of the therapeutic effect, and we want to understand all the range of motion in that way. Right? I can extend the elbow as well. Right? With my palms up, it's a very clear yin kind of movement where I'm bringing the yin surfaces together, right? The inner arm is the yin surface. With my palm up, I can see, right? Bring it towards the yin surface. That's flexion, right? Extension is moving it back, right, towards the yang surface of the body. So again, I'm going to be here shortening the yin surface, lengthening the yang, and then shortening the yang surface, lengthening the yin. Lengthening moves, right, disperses Qi, and lengthening, or rather shortening, gathers it together and supplements it. Both of these things are important, right? Because we want the Qi to move freely. We don't want any accumulations and stagnations, so moving and dispersing is important. We also want to make sure there's enough Qi in blood in the tissues that they're healthy, and that's the supplementing, right? So it's complementary. We do both in alternation. I can turn my hands over. Now it's a more complicated relationship. So I bring the yang surface of my arm towards the yin surface of the arm, upper arm. So that's more complicated. We already talked about the elbow range of motion. That's supination, palm up, like holding a bowl of soup. Pronation, palm down. And I can also combine them. Right? feel a little bit more of that chi sensation while combining flexion extension with pronation supination, I shouldn't be too surprised. There's a couple ways to combine them. One, palms up as I'm bringing them in. The other would be palms facing down or out, palm facing them in. Right? And then I can reverse palms forward as I extend. So that's the other combination, and both are worth doing and seeing how they feel. Now, as I do these range of motion exercises, not only am I paying attention to the subtle stretch, right, what's lengthening, what's shortening, and any chi sensation, but I also may notice some restrictions, places where things don't move freely, they feel like they're catching, a little stuck or uncomfortable. And anything like that is referred to as obstruction, not just obstruction to the free movement of the tissues, but if the tissues aren't moving freely, the chi's not going to move freely either. Right? If the muscles and tendons, right, don't move freely, then the fascia is also not moving. Right? So I won't get the same kind of chi sensation or chi movement. And vice versa, if the fascia is kind of stuck, then the muscles and tendons aren't going to behave themselves either. But fascia is sticky stuff, and it has a lot of lubricating fluid to make sure the planes glide over each other. Right? There's fascia right under your skin, between the skin and muscle layers. There's fascia wrapping each muscle, wrapping each little muscle packet. The packet of each fiber is inside. The fascia gets thicker, right, more concentrated, and becomes tendons. Right? It also wraps the bones, the periosteum, same kind of connective tissue essentially. And the periosteum, right, connects from bone to bone. We call that a ligament. Right? It gets a different name for what it's wrapped in, right? But the essential makeup of the fascia is very close. Right? It's mostly collagen. And how thick and tough it is versus how thin and flexible it is changes depending on where it is in the body and what it's supposed to be doing. But it all needs to be lubricated. And one of the things range of motion exercises are meant to do in Chinese medicine is not just activate the chi, but move fluids as well. Keep all the connective tissue well irrigated so that it can flow smoothly. So that's another aspect, right, when we feel things aren't moving freely, just in terms of the actual tissues of the body. We do that kind of range of motion to try to free it up very gently and without force. In the shoulder, first I want to bring the shoulder blades up and down. And there's two ways I can lift my shoulder blade. One where I feel like I'm lifting the whole area from the end of the shoulder right up to the neck, up towards my ear. And that's called elevation. The other way is where I just lift the outer portion of the shoulder. So as the outer portion of the shoulder comes up, the inner portion stays down and relaxed. In Chinese therapeutic movement, usually we just use upward rotation, or the outer portion lifts, rather than elevation. The main reason this is that if I elevate both shoulders and I pay attention to my breathing, I'll notice it probably feels a little restricted, restrained, not too comfortable. Chest feels up, a little tight or full. But I can lift the outer shoulder, that rotation of the scapula, where the outer corner of the scapula lifts, the scapula being the shoulder blade. Right, I can do that on both sides and still keep my chest relaxed and my breathing deep and comfortable. It can be useful, however, to lift the whole shoulder blade up towards the ear, right? Especially if that kind of range of motion is impinged or too tight, right? If it's not moving freely, or I can't access it, right? Meaning inhibited, I can't actually get my shoulder to lift even though nothing seems to be in the way, or whether it seems stuck up all the time. Right? Practicing this is useful. If I don't want that uncomfortable feeling in the chest and restriction of the breath, then I can just do it one side at a time, and usually I can keep my breath relaxed and deep. So there are occasions where doing this kind of movement is going to be very helpful. The muscles that connect the shoulder blade all the way up through the neck, right up to the base of the head, are involved in lifting that, the trapezius, levator scapula. By doing this, I can feel what the full range of motion really is. Sometimes lifting it extra can help me figure out how to relax it down, release it down, which is what most people need to do, right, with these thick shoulder neck muscles like the trapezius muscle. But I also want to practice just rotation. And again, I can do this on both sides bilaterally without too much discomfort. So here, I put my fingers right at the base of the neck, trying to keep this part sinking and relaxed as the outer shoulder lifts. And this is an important practice point for many of the exercises we'll be doing. I can also pull my shoulders forward and pull them back. So protraction is bringing the shoulders forward. Sometimes it's called adduction, because it's as if I'm bringing them towards the center of the body. Retraction is bringing them back, sometimes called abduction, so it feels like they're moving away from the center of the body. And the ideal position for the shoulders in most of our exercises is neutral, not pulled forward, not pulled back. But right now, again, it's helpful to do that range of motion because I'm not going to be doing it in all the exercises very often. And all range of motion is worth exploring. So, again, it helps warm me up a little bit, but also gives me a sense of where the middle is and where the neutral position of my shoulders will be front to back. If I combine these two things, again, I get circumduction, circling movement. Make it kind of noisy under your shoulder blade, and we're not going to worry about any funny noises or crackling, strange sensations when we do this. Those noises and any sort of rough feeling, it's again when the fascia, the connective tissue, typically is not well lubricated and it gets stuck together or adhesed. And gentle range of motion is often enough to start to work the fibers apart, right? Because the layers should slide over one another for smooth movement and get some of the fluid in there to lubricate things. I want to go both directions in that circle. And as I do this, you can see again, I'm not bringing my whole shoulder blade up towards my neck and ear. I'm just doing that rotation. So upward rotation and then downward rotation if I pull it down towards the floor. In the simple range of motion, usually I don't try to yank my shoulder down. It's really just forward protraction, upward rotation, retraction back, and then to the neutral position again. That doesn't mean there aren't some times where actually pulling it down won't be useful as well. As long as I don't use too much force. And I can do both sides at the same time. So moving forward is towards the yin surface. Right? And I can feel that the inner shoulder and the chest, again, the distance, the length of it shrinks. Right? The fascia is coming together and taking tension off of it. It's gathering and supplementing. Whereas the back, the upper back, back of the shoulders is stretching out. That's the yang surface. And then when my shoulders come back, it's the opposite. The yin surface, the front surface, opens up and the back surface shrinks. The shoulders also abduct, adduct. Right? So abduct means move away from the body, from the center line. Adduct means bring it in. Sitting in the chair, I can't swing my hand very freely because my legs are in the way, but I can bring my hand all the way across the center line in the adduction and deduction. Adduction is a yang kind of movement because it moves away from the body. So anything that reaches out away from me is yang, anything that gathers in towards my center is yin. So abduction is always a yang kind of movement. Right? And it's very activating and moving in general. Bringing something in towards my body in general is going to be more gathering, supplementing. And here, as with all these range of motion, I'm trying to balance them out. If I bring my hand above the height of my shoulder, I start to add upward rotation as well. So now I'm adding two kinds of movement. Right? Abduction just gets me here to the level of the shoulder. It's done mostly by the deltoid muscle, right? With a little help from one of the rotator cuff muscles, the supraspinatus. But once I start to lift higher, other muscles are engaged, right? Ones that move the shoulder blade, right? Like the lower aspect of the trapezius muscle. So that becomes actually combined range of motion. Looks like I'm doing the same thing, but I'm adding movement of my scapula now to just the actual shoulder joint, or the glenohumeral joint. In general, abducting the arm is yang, right? But when I look at the arm itself, the shoulder itself, I'm shortening the top aspect as I open up the lower aspect. So I'm lengthening and so moving the yin portion while I'm shortening and supplementing the top portion. So there's a lot of different ways yin and yang can be applied to body surfaces, range of motion. Right? More general ways, more specific ways. The last big range of motion is rotation. So when my shoulder turns in, right, towards the center, it's internal rotation. When my shoulder is rotating out, external rotation. Internal rotation in general is a yin movement, moving towards the front of the body, moving towards the back of the body. External rotation is yang. The yin movement lengthens and moves the yang portion, supplements the yin portion. The yang movement outward shortens the yang portion, moves the yin portion. Right? And I can combine range of motion in the shoulder joint by moving forward, right, which is flexion. Oh, actually, I almost skipped flexion extension. There's one big range of motion, that's why I hadn't done the circling yet. So forward is flexion. At a certain point, you're going to start to feel that your scapula is rotating again as well. But you can just do flexion, isolate it, and get the hand pretty high. Right? Maybe not 180 degrees before you also start to feel the scapula moving as well. Free range of motion means you can get your hand straight up in the air, 180 degrees. If I want to do this with neutral rotation of the arm, my palm's going to face the side of my body and come up that way. And then you should be able to get your arm back at least 30, 40 degrees. So flexion towards the front, extension towards the back. The front being the yin plane, the back being the yang plane. I can combine this with rotation of the shoulder. Right? So I can have the palm facing forward in the yin position as I do both ranges. And have the palm facing back, trying to do some of that rotating, not just from the elbow now, but from the shoulder as well, putting the shoulder into a different position. So when the palm turns back, it tends to rotate my shoulder inward. When my palm turns forward, it tends to also turn my shoulder outward. And I can combine this range of motion, rotation, with flexion and extension. And again, once I start combining range of motion, I might notice a stronger chi sensation. That subtle pressure or distension, warmth and activation, a little tingle or buzz. Different ways of combining, right? Palm can come up as I come into flexion, or the palm can go down, face down as I go into flexion. Right? Which makes the opposite combination. Now I'm ready to do the circling. All the way around, and when I do the rotation, I'll tend to notice I need to include internal and external rotation. So it's going to be related to that combination movement we just did. So if you make the range of motion as large as you comfortably can without forcing it, you'll notice that your palm changes the way it's facing, which means your shoulder is rotating as well generally to accommodate it. You don't have to think about which way your shoulder should be going, it'll do it automatically. One other thing that's useful to know about the yin and yang planes, or the yin and yang channels, is when the channels are yin, they tend towards deficiency, meaning they usually require some supplementing, that gathering in. The yang planes tend towards excess, right? Same way we tend to feel a lot of our stiffness through the upper back and the back of the neck, right? Those are yang planes. That stiffness and tension is an excess condition, and so the yang channels need dispersing and moving. Right? That's just a tendency. It can be either combination, right? Sometimes you have to move the yin, sometimes you have to supplement the yang, but typically what most people see when they're basically healthy is that the yin are often a little deficient, right? And you can feel how those tissues are often a little softer, right? Not just the quality of the skin, but the tissues underneath, whereas the tissues on the outside are a little firmer and harder, right? That's part of their yin and yang nature, soft being yin, hard being yang. But the hard can get too hard, right? There should always be some difference between them, and the yin can get too soft. And that's one of the things we're also noticing is sort of the quality of the tissues, their firmness. Right? Are they too firm? Are they not firm enough? Or are they right in the middle where they should be? We're going to finish with just a movement of massage. And I'm going to massage one arm with the opposite hand. And we're going to start by pushing down the inner arm and up the back and over the shoulder, down the inside and up the back. And this is the direction of channel flow. So in the arms, the yin surfaces, the yin channels, move from the body towards the extremity. And the yang channels move from the extremity up towards the body. It's like a circulatory direction. So if I want to go with the channel flow, I go down the inside of the arm and up the back. That's considered supplementing, right? That helps strengthen the flow of the movement. If I go the opposite direction, which is also done, this is considered dispersing, right? So there's some excess tension I'm trying to get rid of, or some pathogen, right? according to Chinese medicine, pathogens invade the channels and need to be expelled. Dispersing, similar to expelling. Get it out and flush it from the body. So now I'm going down the yang surface and up the yin surface. And in exercise, it's common to do the supplementing direction before the dispersing direction. There's one more manipulation I can do where I can pat or percuss the body. Right? Percussing is sometimes done with a relaxed fist, sometimes with an open palm. Open palm being a little more flexible, in that I can sort of cup my hand and thinking of gathering the qi and blood into these tissues, into the yin surface, into the channels. Again, because they tend to be deficient. When I get to the yang surface, I open my hand, it's a little slappier. So, cupping my hand, gathering, packing blood and qi into those tissues and channels, slapping, dispersing any excess, right? Relieving some of that tension. If I prefer the version with the relaxed fist, it's very light and loose, right? It's not heavy, dead force, right? Very light and flexible. I can still think, right, just with the quality of my fist, that I'm sort of packing in on the yin surface. And then just a little harder, right? And a little less flexible to disperse. Same idea. In many ways, these kinds of self-massages work. So that finishes our exploration of the yin and yang planes, range of motion in the upper limb.